Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Back in town in Houston after attending the Seattle Pacific Audio Fest, and I'm only in town again for a few days before I go back out of town to Los Angeles. Now that's just for fun. We're going to Los Angeles. Got to get some more clothes, crazy clothes for the nightlife, but maybe members will have some information and videos from that, but nothing audio related. So while I was in town, I was going to leapfrog all the other stuff I have for you. As you've seen in YouTube Shorts yesterday, I filmed some more stuff, and my friend Joseph, who just took delivery on Rockport Cygnus with 2 REL 25s. I've got stuff still from Doug's house in New Orleans. I've got stuff, still tracks from that $1 Million Audio System. And probably while I'm out of town, I'm going to schedule to be released the In-Acoustic Power Conditioner review. I've kind of done a summary review. I haven't had a ton of time with it yet because I've been out of town so much in July, but I have enough to give you guys a preliminary review and feedback. There's so many people that want to borrow the demo model that I don't want to hog it and prevent people from getting a chance to hear it, but people have been asking me my impressions, so I'm going to try to release that this weekend, and then I'll come back and hopefully in August I'll be able to catch up for you guys. But leapfrogging, wanted to get out a summary video of the Pacific Audio Fest while things are fresh in my mind. And normally when I do these videos, I do it just stream of conscious, what pops to my head. But I think this time I'm going to do it a little bit different and use the help of the book, and I thumb through and kind of refresh my memory of what it was. A small enough show where there weren't a ton of vendors and a ton of floors and stuff. And so let's talk about the show in general first. I mentioned this in one of my daily wrap-ups, but in case you didn't see, this was the first year, I'm told, of this show, certainly the first year of me going to it. And it was relatively small and lightly attended, especially on Friday and Sunday. And so from an attendee standpoint, it was a dream show. I mean, I got the front row wherever I want. I could interact with most all the rooms. There was just no room that I had to come back when it was too busy. It just, from an attendee standpoint, it was great. And again, not that many vendors, so you could spend time in it, go back to your favorite rooms multiple times without feeling like you missed anybody. So great time in terms of from an attendee standpoint. On the flip side, understandably, some of the exhibitors I heard were disappointed in the turnout, but sometimes you can get too many people that aren't really audiophiles checking out these shows and cluttering up the rooms. From what I could tell, talking to the attendees that were there, they were very sophisticated. There were many of you that were subscribers that came up to me and said hi. So great meeting some of you guys, and it was great getting your feedback. And I'm going to share as well, not only my feedback, but some of your feedback, people I talked about, because it's not just about what I think is the best. You know, there's tons of different opinions, tons of different ears and tastes. So I'm going to share with you not only what I think of these rooms, but the scuttlebutt from other people, what they shared, and let you, figure out on your own, as well as with the music clips, what may interest you. But again, I think the show, if it gets some momentum next year, the good news is that they had a lot of brands that weren't at any of the other shows I attended, Florida, Expona, Long Beach. They had the Genesis room, which you almost never see, certainly with his reference ones. All See Vox, haven't seen them this year, although they did exhibit a lot in the past at Rocky Mountain and Long Beach the prior to COVID. There was just a ton of brands that were innovative, unique, and that's one of the biggest takeaways from this. Wasn't so much the sound from the show, which overall was super high quality, almost every room, with one exception, and that one that I mentioned at the end of the day summary. Every time I go into that room at every show, I hear distortion. I look around to see what the deal is, but nobody seems bothered by it. But I don't feel it's fair enough to upload, because at first I thought, it's just first day jitters, but now I've seen it at every show. I don't know. I've heard indirectly, because I share this information in the membership section, and then people at the show, that this gentleman records a lot of stuff off of vinyl and may prefer a little bit of noise and whatnot, crackly. I don't know. It's just not to my taste. So before I know for sure, I didn't want to hurt the brand with uploading clips that are just not, room is not running well. So anyway, we'll leave that. That's the only room that I can recall that I left out intentionally. If I don't feature a room, let me get this out the way, because if I don't feature a room, it's usually not because of that reason, not because it's bad room. It's usually because I can't either get to it. It was too crowded at the time. Maybe they had some, like we see in a few instances, they have technical difficulties. So I try to do as much or more than any other press there. Give every room a fair shake, at least one song, and interact with the people if they are willing to interact, and give you guys as much as possible. Now, if some people, if you're not featured, if you're an exhibitor and you weren't featured and you want to reach out to me, say what happened to the video, it could be also because Beatles were playing and it got blocked. And that video, like right now, I have one video from Linkwitz, a follow-up. I went in there with Steve McCormick. You guys haven't even seen that yet. We played the Beatles, and that blocked the entire video. So I got to go back, edit it out, and then I'll upload our second visit. I went with Steve McCormick, and he was impressed too with that room. But I'll talk about Linkwitz in more detail. And so anyway, that being said, if I don't feature you, that's usually the case. It's not because of any intentional malice or whatnot. Now, some people reach out to me and ask about that. More than willing to help you and explain why I didn't upload a video or where it might be or what happened if you're interested. If you act entitled, if you act snarky about it, then it's probably best, you better be glad that I didn't mention you, because I do this on my own. No, I don't work for anybody. I don't work for Stereophile, anybody. I don't have to take orders from anybody on what I do. I do this for free. I don't make any money doing it. When I upload these clips with music clips, there's no revenue to me from YouTube. So I'm doing this just as industry service. So if people want to get snarky and entitled, then it's probably best that I don't mention you, and you might be happy that I didn't mention you. That's something. Luckily, this show had the best vendors of all shows. Almost none of the 0.1% of the bad people or the people I'm less enthused about none of those people were here. So it was great, and that's another thumbs up to this show. Everything was great, other than from attendee standpoint, some of the rooms were pretty hot. I was wearing a sport coat one day, and man, I was sweating in some of those rooms. I had to go leave and take a shower and then come back because it was really hot in Seattle, and they're not used to using air conditioning and whatnot. So getting that part out of the way, I hope it succeeds. I hope it builds. I'm a little bit worried that exhibitors may have been disappointed at this point. Now, let's talk about rooms that jump out. And let me talk about the ones that, without me even looking at the book, I can talk about. And a lot of this has to do with ones that surprised me or were super high level to my taste. And so obviously I mentioned the Linkwitz. They are great open baffle design. I featured the gentleman in Houston who sells them here and offers home demos. I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time on the Linkwitz because I already have talked about it, but Steve McCormick and I went back. It resonated with him as well. And there's other rooms that I like, he doesn't like either. So it's not like we're, always agree on everything, but that was a room where I think almost everybody I talked to and I asked, what room did you like? That room got brought up the most. And on my shuttle going back to the airport from the hotel, I was on the shuttle with one guy who is a subscriber. He talked to me and he said, yeah, that was one of his favorite rooms, if not his favorite. And then the other gentleman in the shuttle, he owned the Linkwitz with the Panzerhold and the black and white. So it was cool seeing what color combination I would buy. He actually had it. So thumbs up to Linkwitz. It's a presentation that I like, open baffle. The bass drivers are totally isolated. That cabinet is not connected to the top part. There is a gap, and you would not believe how much that improves the mid-range and up when you don't have other things in that cabinet creating vibrations and resonances. So thumbs up to almost everything related to the Linkwitz and the presentation there. And be on the lookout for that other video that I filmed that had the Beatles that I have to cut out and upload. Another room that I was excited to see and kind of lived up to the hype was Audiophiles. They've always been the Maggies on steroids, kind of Maggies. If you like Maggies, I think you'll love Audiophiles, other than the price. They give you that acoustic wave that's a little more powerful and offsets some of the negatives people feel with Maggies needing subs and not having quite the bass impact and just the slam. What was nice is that this is the first time I've seen the Audiophile in a small, normal hotel room, and while they have sounded better when I've heard them in the bigger rooms, the conference rooms, and the suites, I was anxious to see how they did in this small room. And while it wasn't the best that Audiophile has ever been heard, in my opinion, I think it was still extremely good and noteworthy for, again, open baffle fans. That was a great chance to hear those in a small room, and they brought the right model for that room. And if you can afford them, those could be end game speakers when you're talking about open baffle line source arrays. You'd be hard pressed to find better in that genre. Now, what else was highlights? Man, probably the room that has the biggest delta of what I was expecting when I went in and when I left. And probably if I had to rank a rooms, when I talk about the recording that was played and what I heard, benchmarking against hearing that track thousands of times in other venues, shows, it was the Kef Parasol Room, and they played No Sanctuary here. And I gotta say, that's one of the best versions I've heard of No Sanctuary here. And ironically, that is played a lot at shows. What was kind of funny, the irony, was that the gentleman in there, I have no relationship with that room, a distributor. I still don't know that guy. He was doing a presentation, so I had no bias towards that room, and I actually have heard the Kef before, and Blades and Parasound, it's good stuff, but I never was, drooling over it or heard anything that resonated with me after the fact. But this one did. And again, I don't know the guy, but he was doing a presentation and he did No Sanctuary here. Now, ironically, he's talked about, I'm going to play an audiophile track a few tracks later, and it was Boss Skaggs, which is an audiophile track. But No Sanctuary here is a bigger audiophile track than even Boss Skaggs, I think, or at least equal. And anyway, I've heard that thousands of times in that presentation of that song. And it's always important to characterize what you hear based on the song that was played, because that's one of the variables. If you don't know the song when they're playing, it's a foreign recording, that's a variable that you don't know what the benchmark is. How does your system play it? How do others play it? You have just to guess. Does it sound good? Well, is the mastering, whatnot, the level of volume that they play it at. The acapella room, which I'm going to talk about in a second, is a perfect example. When I went in there 2 times before, they were playing so low and music that really didn't showcase, in my opinion, what those speakers could do. When I went back and requested a song that I thought would show it off, and we played it at a volume, all of a sudden my impression of that room changed. So you got to keep that in mind when people give their reviews. Did they just hear one track they're not familiar with and make a judgment? That's a primitive way of analyzing show coverages. So with No Sanctuary here in the Kef Parasol Room was among the best I've ever heard of that song at a show. And in many respects, I really like my bass performance here. I got a lot of advantage with bass. I think they did a phenomenal job in that room with the bass. It was just, and they, not surprisingly, another takeaway from this show is that they had a ton of, well, not a ton, but very extensive ASC tube traps and throughout the room and in the corners. And I want to just say that's the only difference. I was trying to figure out what's different this time with Kef blades and this Parasound gear that's making it really stand out. Obviously, whoever set it up did a great job, and whoever did the room treatments. But this ASC tube trap is a takeaway that I would put in the box of other things that were fun and noteworthy that I will always remember from this show. I almost characterize this show as the ASC tube trap show, because they were throughout the entire show in many rooms. And I think it was a common denominator in many of the rooms that I found really good. And if you've been watching my channel for a long time, I've always espoused the benefits of ASC tube traps. You see one right here. They can be too powerful, and I got some back there too. And you got to be careful how you use them. But I have a video in the marketplace, if you're interested, where they were doing a demo. I had a Lazy Susan where they had one of these tube traps and a speaker playing into it, and you can hear when you twist this, diffusion versus absorption, both with an SPL meter and your own ears. So you, subjective, objective, whatever you want to be, that demo covered it all to show you just how powerful these things are and what they can do, and how I think they're better than these other splash plate boxes that you could make yourself. I mean, these are good, I have them, but if I had my druthers, I would go with all ASC treatments. I just think they're a tad bit above and have to give you that versatility. So again, in terms of a review of best things at the show, thumbs up to ASC Tube Trap, thumbs up to Linkwitz, thumbs up to Alcivox, thumbs up to Kef. Another one that really stood out, and I benchmark it against other other shows I've seen them into this year, was the Vac and von Schweikert room. Again, I've heard them several times. They're always high quality, beautiful gear, nothing really to complain about. But you go in there usually with high expectations, and for the most part at all the shows they've met my expectations. But in this time, it was better than all those other shows. And I even made that comment to the guys after I left, and they kind of agreed. And I think part of it was due to the noise floor of the show. Less people. They're usually a very busy room at all these other shows, and so noise floor alone can be an aspect. But gear wise it's pretty much the same, but for whatever reason their setup and everything combined was much better than I remember them at the other shows, and so thumbs up to those guys. Similarly, the Cora guys are at all the shows, and they always have super high quality, so you go in there with high expectations. And this time they played one of my favorite tracks, the Greg Brown brand new 64 Dodge, and it sounded phenomenal on LP, with an LP I'm very familiar with. And so one of the takeaways though with Acora in this show is now I'm better understanding. If you watch my coverage of Florida, I was somewhat critical, not of Acora, but I was critical of people that were so wowed by Acora being in that big room, because they said, oh, it sounded like a concert arena. It sounded like I was in an arena. Well, that was because of the venue they were in, was basically where they hold wedding receptions. You could have put some PA speakers in there and it would have accomplished the same thing. What the thing that's great about the Acora is not that in that venue, yes, it could fill it up and it's impressive, but it's other things I think that about the Acora that to me stand out. The nuances, everything, the tonal balance, the ability to not just fill a room with sound and wow you in that, but coherency. And for a point source box, which isn't my favorite, I like open baffles. I've not been shy about that, but it's one of those point source box speakers that I could own and be happy with. And I think people that do like that, it doesn't have these drivers that call attention to themselves, shout at you. And on top of that, what my takeaway is now learning and talking to those guys more is these guys not only know how to make a great speaker and great quality inside and out, but they know how to set up a room. They've been put in big rooms and they accept the challenge. And sometimes that is the tipping point of what you should choose when you're choosing a brand. Yes, you can look at all these metrics and stats, but when the people behind it can go into almost any venue and create a great sound like Acora has done time after time after time, that tells you that these guys know more than just how to put fancy parts, and sexy wrapping or whatever in a box and get measurements or whatever. They know how to set up a room, and to me that's just as important of evaluating somebody in a company as anything. So thumbs up to those guys as usual. They did a great job. And that was downstairs, all those rooms, Vac, and it was only really those two that I remember. There was that room within a room that had the clip speakers. He created a room within a room. So that was another takeaway that I've never seen before. But I got to tell you, probably the one thing that is a takeaway from this show that I'll never forget was the gentleman that I mentioned, the craziest room I've ever been in. If you haven't watched that video, I encourage you to do it. You might have to wait until I get a chance to talk to the actual, it's a little bit further in that video where I get to talk to the actual person. But from the very start of going in that room, I knew I was going to like it, and I knew I was in store for something. He had cheese and ketchup in the back. He had a top hat with steampunk goggles where you could drop the card in. It was just like right up my alley, fun guy. And he had I think somebody in the comments said it right, these burkas over the speakers, totally covered. And when you pull the cover off of them, they were rough. This was a prototype that was not ready for prime time, at least visually. But talking to this guy was it was enthralling. I mean, I was just, alpaca wool port plugs, guys. Did you hear that? Alpaca wool. I got to call Stavros Danos. He needs to put alpaca wool stuff in his next, MBL2. You gotta keep up with the times, guys. But everything with that speaker, he was using like legacy Heil. I did recognize that being a vintage piece, but then what he was doing with it and how he was mounting it, and then that port in the back and the stuff inside the port he was talking about. Just watch that video. Everything he did, the front baffles and all these things, was just mind-boggling. Just crazy. Fun guy. And unfortunately the speaker wasn't ready, and I didn't spend time in the listening position, but I definitely told him to email me when it's ready and where you're going to be. I'd like to listen to him at some point. The other macro takeaway, other than the rooms, that I saw that really was a theme of this show was the power, attention to power delivery. And I was particularly interested in that because I've been evaluating the acoustic, but also Michael Fremer made a big deal about his power and his system being transformed recently. And actually, two of the guys that were involved that had different booths at this show. And you saw in one, I was on the 13th floor, I believe, and it was a nice room. It had the Magic OS 5, Tyco server, Strom Tank, Constellation Audio, MSB DAC, and the room was fine. But what really stood out about that room was what was in the foyer, almost near the bathroom, was the in the sink area was this power product that basically, you should watch that video. It talks about, at the end, talking about power product. You'll see it in the playlist. I have a playlist of all the videos, so you can just scroll down through that playlist. You should be able to find it. But it's basically a dedicated line with a 5 amp, 50 amp circuit, 5 gauge, 50 amp circuit, and then a distributor box with in your listening position, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of people have dedicated lines like I do, but then you still only have 2 outlets. So how do you get that power to all the equipment in your room? And a lot of these power conditioners, as I said, bring down the performance, not enhance the performance. Even though they may say they reduce noise, and they may on a meter say they reduce noise, they're still adding a level of resistance to get that reduced noise and just duplicating what your gear is already doing. So in my opinion, they mostly decrease your performance. But this is combining basically a dedicated line with a power distribution block at super high quality, which I even brought Steve McCormick back there, and he was also intrigued by this. Well, and it's very hard to impress him with especially power related products, because he actually makes his own. He had to make his own as well because he hadn't found many things in the industry that fit the bill. And so this one actually intrigued him, intrigued me. And also the other gentleman had a booth in the marketplace, King Rex, and he was very impressive, and I've been talking to him since the show. Should have some news on that. I may actually be a potential client for doing this and sharing that with you guys, but I don't want to jump the gun there. That could be some future material, but it was very encouraging to see a lot of attention brought to power delivery. And I know there's always subjective, objective, and people that poo-poo it, but think of it, guys. If what matters inside your box of your equipment matters, why, just because the chassis is not around it anymore, does the other stuff not matter? Like all the wires all the way back to your box. If the things inside the box matter to you and increase performance in your mind, then the stuff outside the box should too, because it's all connected. Things don't just end and stop and start with a chassis. Okay, so there is a level of disregard for power delivery and what it can do, and especially with grounding and having all your equipment on one line, that should bring the noise floor alone. And we've proven many times, and I'll talk about this more in the acoustic, that things from power can be heard on your speakers. A ground loop is a perfect example. So addressing power related things, but in the right way, not with overpriced, filters, UPSs, all these other things that I don't think materially help you for the price. These kind of things that I'm highlighting at the show, I think are things that are worthwhile investing in and really aren't that much money if you've already got the rest of your equipment settled. So didn't want to get too much off on a tangent, but that was a key takeaway from this show that I think some people may miss when they just focus on, the brands. Now, let me go ahead and go through some of the floors on this and make sure I captured everybody. On the first floor ballroom was the VAC and a Cora, and also that room within a room. I talked about those. Those are fine. In the vendor area, Kirmus, Wally Tools, those are the two most common products that any of my friends that are vinyl related. So go back. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with their presentations this show, but go back and watch them. I've had lots of stuff on the Kirmus record cleaner and Wally Tools. Another gentleman from Houston that I met, he was at the show. He bought the Wally Tools in the last hour of the show, actually the last minutes of the show. And also sharing it was the AV Showroom's Norman Varney. He's got very impressive stuff as well, and he's got some room treatments. He's visited that facility that was featured in Stereophile, and so his products are something you should look at. As I mentioned, the King Rex guy with the power, replacing your breaker box with a higher end one and what potential benefits that can have, and grounding and doing consulting projects there. Not something to overlook, something to think about once you've got everything else in order. Let's see. There was some other things in there. Obviously, ASC tube traps in there. I talked about them. I think that covers most of the stuff. In the vendor area where they had the headphones, obviously Stax, the 9000s, or I got the chance to listen to them. They're just phenomenal speakers. You have to, headphones, you have to condition yourself when you're listening to headphones. You're not going to have the bass impact. They're not going to do certain things, the acoustic wave that you get from your live system. And I still prefer listening to this kind of system overall, but when you can hear almost zero distortion, no room interactions, you're hearing every single thing that's on that recording in a purity and level that is unmatched. The Stax 9000s were phenomenal, and I'll have a review, preliminary review of the Blue Hawaii SE. Right now I'm using it with the 007 Stax, so that's another video I'm behind on. Second floor, Cascade, was really great. Every room there had the Kef room, which I already talked about. The acapella, once I got to go in that room, play a great track that showcased them. You got to hear a little bit of the benefit of that plasma tweeter, which is among the best of the world. It still wasn't the best presentation ever and the best room ever, but I think you got a taste of what is possible. Certainly the Spherons that I featured in the $1 Million System, those are a whole nother level, but these were beautiful looking acapellas. You have to see them up close, and definitely something you want to audition. If you're into classical music, dynamic, these are something that these are the speakers you may want to take a hard look at. The other ones up there, High End by Oz, I mean, that's always a great room. The analog tape deck by United Home Audio, Greg, I featured that on several occasions. We didn't go into that same level of detail this time, but watch my other videos. The United Home Audio deck is among the best in the world, and one of the few products that almost nobody will argue with you about as being the best. And then the High End by Oz, the Thorax gear is phenomenal. If you can get away with 300 Bs powering your speakers, beautiful gear, beautiful sounding. The Borisons sounded great. So it was a high quality room. I went in there 3 times. The other thing about Oz and them is they always play great music. The catalog that Greg has on analog tape is something that you definitely don't want to miss. It was a lot of fun hanging out with those guys, and so they make the show fun. So thumbs up to Oz and their crew. Cat, Convergent Audio Technology, with I think they were with the Magicos, sounded good. The Cat stuff has been around for a long time, so you want to kind of look at them as a potential if you're into tubes and you're tired of this familiar ARC, the familiar tube brands. Cat's kind of a little under the radar, but right up there with them, if not better. Joseph Audio, I mentioned this. Unfortunately, my phone was out of battery when I went in there. Phenomenal sound. And what was interesting is that I mentioned in a video I did about the beginning of the year, my 20 years ago, 30 years ago, on the shows, what were the most memorable rooms. And I think I mentioned in that video, Joseph Audio, in around the year 2000 in New York at a Stereophile show, he did a presentation that still to this day I remember. And I remember the track. And I told him, this was the first time I actually had a chance to talk to Jeff Joseph and talk to him. Another benefit of the show not being that crowded. And we played that track. Now, he didn't have it on LP like he did back then, but what I mentioned in the summary video of the day, and unfortunately I don't have this on video, but it was so good, I was like, man, this is so much better than at my house. Now, at my house, all I can play is the streaming version, which quite frankly, even though there's 2 versions on the streaming of St. James Infirmary, Louis Armstrong, it's not that good. And so he was using, I think, a ripped copy of the LP as his streaming digital version, and it sounded so much better. But also his gear is great. Those Joseph Audio Pearls have evolved over time, and that's definitely a speaker that you should look at if aesthetically and sound wise. Point source box, that would be another one of those in that realm that I would consider owning, even though point source boxes aren't my #1 genre favorite type. The other ones in there, okay, Genesis Audio, I featured them a lot, and that was a busy room with high noise floor a lot of the time, so I don't have a lot of clips to feature there, but that speaker as well, because it was just fresh out of being created. This is another iteration of that Infinity IRS beta. Gary's been evolving that over the years. It's not the vintage version, and this one was just fresh. All the drivers were fresh, and so it was going through some growing pains there. And then, quite frankly, the seating was pretty far back in that room, and then they had a pillar, and I did not ever feel sitting in those seats that it was the place that I prefer to sit and hear these open baffles like that, especially when they're close together. When I did stand up and go closer, which is fair to do when you have line arrays, you can stand up and go closer and get pretty much the same as if you're sitting down. And man, it sounded so good. I almost wanted to bring a seat and put it real close, because I'm used to in here that near field listening with open baffle, getting more of that headphone presentation. Again, this is a taste thing, so I'm just being transparent there. That's what I like better, and when I got closer, man, those were very impressive. Tonal balance was good. I mean, probably he was a little light on the bass towers, but maybe not to have it bleed through onto his suite mates. So there's always factors involved, and that's why sometimes these rooms are playing a little bit lower volume than that can showcase really what they can do. So keep that in mind as well. Again, we listen to lacquers in there. I do have recordings of this. I haven't uploaded them yet. I have some pure vinyls that are clear that he played. That presentation by Steve McCormick and Gary Coe, and then the recordings that he played for us were phenomenal. So again, it's a case of if you went in that room and weren't wowed, I can understand it at certain times, but if you got to be in there for the presentations, got to sit in the right spot, that definitely is a speaker that is among the best cost no object speakers out there, and that brand as a whole is amazing. So kudos to those guys. Across the way, the Goebel, again, at Expona, I didn't have the best experiences in there in terms of the music was not my type. The sound was great, but part of my enjoyment of a room is, am I hearing stuff I like? But this time, the gentleman in there was playing some great music. I mean, he was playing to Seattle. He played some, I don't think I had it on camera, but he was playing some Nirvana, and doing a tribute to where we were, Seattle. Great music, great guy, great room, had that dark spookiness, and it just worked. So very excited to hear the Goebels playing some cool music, and thumbs up to them. Nothing bad. In fact, that was a room that other people brought up as one of their favorites. So I think that covers most of them on that floor. There was another floor, the Wing 2. They had Voxative, R-Render, Linear Tube Audio, Songer, Vanatu. For reference, for budget, the Vanatu stuff, a few $100, and then you put a sub with it. Guys, whether you have kids going to school and upcoming and they need something for their dorm room, look at this Vanatu stuff. If you're on a tight budget, I know times are tough right now, you're not going to be that far off. As you heard in the Gary Coe presentation, some of the things that you hear with lacquers versus not, versus all these things that he was talking about, you can hear them on Vanatu speakers as well as these Genesis speakers. So you're not, yes, are you sacrificing some things at a few $100? Of course you are, but you're not that far off, and you shouldn't feel ashamed if you've got a Vanatu system. I'm not going to look down on you if you had Vanatu and subs. In fact, I think I'd be impressed that you know which budget brands to buy and to get the best value for your money. So Vanatu, thumbs up to them. They always are at these shows and do a great job for pennies on the dollar. I don't even know how they do it for the cost. Let's see. Audio Note was good. Songer Audio, I think is that the one that had there was one room that had technical difficulty, so I felt bad for them, and I unfortunately didn't get a chance to go back. But again, that's what sometimes happens. There's just gear doesn't get sent, gear gets damaged. You know, you're setting up gear that you are sharing suite mate with and you're not familiar with. So give these guys a break. Don't hold it against them. That's just part of the challenges. And try to help them when you can. Like you've seen me in videos, I've pointed out where if the speakers are out of phase, I've told them, and you know they change it, and most of them are thankful for it. In the Alta Audio Room, which is another one I should mention soon, great room. I noticed second time I went in there, I spent more time. I was in that main center seat, really close, and I could tell the presentation was off to the right a little bit. So if you notice in the video, I got up, kind of aligned the speakers, and I sat back down and did it again. And I told him, I said, I think your right speaker is a little further closer than your left speaker. And sure enough, it was. And they thanked me, and they did it, and they fixed it. You want to try to help these brands, there's only so much they can do, and things, people are always moving stuff, doing a lot of things. So things being out of phase, wires being changed, and things set up, help these guys out when you can. And most of them, when you see them respond that way, that's just another subliminal thing that tells you these are the people you want to deal with. Because if you have any problem with their gear, look at how they react. They say thank you and do it. They don't, oh, I intended it to be 2 inches different, or I intended this to be this way, out of phase, making excuses. No, you want to see that intellectual honesty from rooms, and it makes me even more impressed with those brands that react that way when you help them. The other floor, Wing 7, first floor, Efficient speakers, those blew me away with these Chinese made, and then how he did it thinking about the center channel as well. Those sounded great with that piano track. So go watch that video on Efficient. It's the first time I experienced with them. It's the one where the port plug flew out though in the middle of a song. It wasn't even a dynamic part, but the port plug flew out while we were talking about it. So that's a first for me. Pretty fun. Also on there was I think Arion speakers was another open baffle. They reminded me a little bit of my ones back here, except their baffle was much bigger and wings, folded wings down, but the driver complement was similar to this. And tonally and sound-wise, it sounded reminiscent. Not much better than those alone, but reminiscent and a high quality open baffle of many that were there, like Spatial. I'll get to them hopefully soon. Let me see what else I got on here. Yeah, let's see. Nothing too much on that floor. Sorry guys, I'm trying to catch everything. So Pure Audio Project was another thing that was on an open baffle. They have the variability of changing out their tweeter to a wide bandwidth driver, or different types of drivers, and you could tell when I went in there, somebody was in the middle seat, that the seat they created was using the same kind of scaffolding that they use for their own speaker, and actually their rack system. So you could get the rack and your seat to match the design of their speakers. So if you're an open baffle fan, I'd put them at a different level of the link widths in the Spatials, GR Research, Ultivox, but the variability of being able to change out that tweeter to your preferences, thumbs up to them on that. Price point as well is good, so definitely one that you should check out. Let's see. Some of these. Okay, 13th floor was a great floor. Not only did they have the one that I talked about earlier, the Linkwitz, but Modrite, great stuff always. The Daedalus Audio, I think, had 2 rooms up there. Beautiful speakers. The finish on them is top notch, and they always have high quality sound, and been at many shows. And in fact, the guy that makes the Daedalus speaker was one of the head guys starting this show, and I got to speak to him. I think you heard me in one of the videos. I think it was in the room with the crazy guy. He was actually in that the craziest room I've ever been in. I shouldn't say crazy guy. He's a great guy. But the craziest room. And the guy with Daedalus, I got to meet him and talk about the show a little bit. And so his stuff is always great. Definitely check that stuff out. Wells Audio is really good. I've always liked Wells Audio, and I remember specifically their headphone amp is really good. So, I can't use it with the stacks, but that would be one I'd be looking at in the headphone arena too. They always make, it's a beautiful looking gear, it's beautiful sounding with the TAD speakers. Definitely nothing really to complain about there. Salk Audio at a budget, I've talked about this many times. My friend Doug has them. You're talking about beautiful finish, top notch for not a lot of cost. I mean, when you talk about T-Doll speakers having the best finish, fit and finish that I've ever seen, that you're paying a lot of money for that. Salk Audio at a fraction of that cost is giving you some amazing fit and finish as well as quality sound. You saw those high quality purified drivers in those. That is a great bargain. If you need a point source box speaker at a reasonable price point, nobody will blow. My friend Doug had those, and they were very comparable to his Lumen Whites, which are 10 times the amount. So kudos to them. The Audio Ultra Room was the one I talked about with the power thing in the foyer area. The Infigo Alta, like I said, they're always one of my favorites. I was disappointed. One of the reasons I went to this show is because he talked about the next higher model in the Alta range that's a dipole. And he says, man, it's a great, even much better than the one that they showed here. So I was anxious to hear it. Unfortunately, it wasn't ready. So it was still the same model that they played in prior shows, which I'm very familiar with. Super high quality, under 20 grand or around 20 grand. This transmission line, mid-range, and bass, man, we played yellow. And again, it doesn't surpass kind of what I have here when I play that same track on yellow. But I have subs and a lot of advantages. That speaker for 20 grand, not having any subs, providing that low range that I don't know how much you can hear from the video, was tremendous. And so, it's not the most resolving speaker, but in a positive way. Some of these speakers that are built at that size and price, they put the hyper analytical tweeter and it calls attention to itself, and it's super detailed and busy at low volumes and at short doses, but not in long doses. This is a speaker that gives you all the resolution and tonal balance and full range that you want, but you can listen to it for hours as well. So if you're in the budget for an end-game speaker at that $20,000 price point or below, the Techniques and those two are the ones that jump out right off the bat as ones that are point source boxes I would check out. Kudos to them. And the Infigo gear is really cool for electronics too. Let's see. Yeah, there was a room up there I didn't get to called Not For Sale, where people were just in there drinking and partying and have a good time. Unfortunately, I missed that, so sorry about that part. And I think that covers most everything. So again, guys, this is a long video. Hopefully you were able to stick it out and enjoyed my coverage throughout the weekend. Next show, I can't tell you which it's going to be. I think it'll be Capital Audio Fest, but stay tuned. I got tons of stuff, almost enough to fill the rest of the year. So sign up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you back here soon.